From the Subaru of Gwinnett studio, this is Injury Insider with Derek Hayes. Injured in Georgia? Make the right call to the law office of Derek M. Hayes at 404-777-HURT. Injury Insider is presented by Status Home Design, your one-stop shop for all your home and gift needs.
Hello and welcome to Injury Insider with Derek Hayes on Business RadioX. We are broadcasting live from the Subaru of Gwinnett studio in the Sonesta Gwinnett Place Atlanta Hotel. This show will answer legal questions and debunk personal injury myths with insight and expertise. For nearly 25 years, Derek Hayes has exclusively represented injured parties in Georgia. Now he'd like to put that knowledge to work for you. My name is Lita Brooks, and it's my pleasure to introduce the star of the show, Derek Hayes. Good afternoon, Derek.
Good afternoon, my fiance.
Oh, we got engaged.
Had to throw that out now.
I know. That was early in the show for you to say that. I wasn't prepared.
Wife-to-be, fiance, I can go with all the terms.
So I guess if someone's tuning in for the first time, there was no teaser there. I am the host of the show. Derek is the star of the show. And we are now an engaged couple.
Yes, we are.
Yes, well, thank you. Yay! There's an applause.
From a legal standpoint, we have a contract that's been created.
We do not.
I asked and you accepted, so yes.
Okay. I'm looking at you like...
Yeah, I know. You're burning your eyes.
All right. Enough of that. Before we begin, a quick reminder that Injury Insider is brought to you by Status Home Design, your one-stop shop for all your home and gift needs, and by the law office of Derek M. Hayes. Injured in Georgia? Make the right call to the law office of Derek M. Hayes at 404-777-HURT. All right. Does everybody get what that car crash means? Derek is a personal injury attorney. Probably what you do the most of would be car crashes, correct?
Yeah, because that's the majority of personal injury claims in general. So yes.
Yes.
Probably 75%, 80% of my practice is car wreck related. Whether it's a tractor trailer, a car, motorcycle, I'd say, easily 80% would be car wreck related.
Okay, so I know that today we're going to unpack a little bit more about you as an attorney and your firm. So if that's the 75-80%, what is the other 20 to 25%?
Oh, goodness. There are all kinds of other torts, which are harms caused to another. That's a civil, calls for a civil remedy, usually compensation. Things like slander and... we talked about that last week.
We did.
Libel
we just did a whole
slander.
show on
We've
that.
talked about slip and falls. We've talked about dog bites. We've talked about other kinds of premises cases. They vary. I've had people that have been injured in businesses. Someone in a hardware store who had a pallet of lumber that was spilled onto the back of their legs. Caused a severe injury. I've had all kinds of traumatic brain injury cases that arose out of things other than car wrecks. So, anything related to an injury caused by someone else.
Wow. It's been a while since you've dedicated an entire show to a personal injury topic that educates us all about the process you go through at your firm. And it seems like most of the recent shows have covered listeners' questions that were submitted through your website. We've done a couple shows of crazy lawsuits because that's, of course, such a crowd pleaser. Right. That's a fun one. And you've even done topics that have come from friends or from current clients.
Yeah.
And we will definitely unpack how listeners can submit questions because clearly, we build shows around them. So keep the questions coming. But I understand that today is a discussion about what separates you and your firm when it comes to presenting severe, life-changing injury cases to insurance companies or juries. Sometimes a case doesn't necessarily get to a jury.
Correct.
Okay. So we're going to unpack all this. And it's really important and extremely informative. And there's going to be a lot. It's almost I like the do's and don'ts list, but it's what you do and what some complaints are against other firms. And so we'll unpack all that. But let's start by defining severe or life-changing injuries. What does that mean?
So we as attorneys refer to those kinds of injuries as catastrophic. That's the term you always hear everybody say. So a catastrophic injury is generally defined as maybe a severe injury to the brain, to the spine, the spinal cord. It can involve fractures of the skull, the spinal column. It can arise directly from violent trauma. You might have in a car wreck. We talked about car wrecks a second ago. That's generally where you see those most severe catastrophic injuries or car wrecks. It could also occur indirectly from complications associated with the original injury. You may have had one kind of injury. In fact, I'll give a perfect example right off the top. I had a client who had a very minor, in the grand scheme of things, car wreck, but as part of the car wreck, she sustained a laceration in her leg. And that laceration became infected during the course of treatment. And she wound up having 2 different amputations on that same leg.
No.
The initial the initial cut was the lower part of her leg by her ankle, and gangrene set in. And so they wound up amputating just above the ankle, and unfortunately didn't work. So they wound up having to amputate at the hip. So what might be initially considered to be a very minor injury in the grand scheme of things can become a catastrophic injury. It can be a permanent, severe functional disability, things that prevent you from doing your normal daily activities. It can be permanent damage to the central nervous system. Think about all kinds of injuries that you've probably known about or heard about with people suffering to their nervous system, but also, too, incapacitation can be caused by damage to the central nervous system that, again, can develop from what might have been a minor condition to begin with, but spreads as a result of a very basic injury or even a severe injury that can, again, magnify over time. And that could be catastrophic in nature. It would usually mean the inability to have any kind of gainful employment, no matter what kind of work you did. If you've got brain trauma, you're not able to function with a computer, or if you're in a sales job, if you're a roofer and you fall off a roof and you break both legs and ultimately wind up having to have surgery with pins and rods and screws, well, you're not going to be climbing on a roof for any period of time. Unfortunately, some attorneys and law firms simply really don't take the time to investigate the injuries enough to identify the ones that are catastrophic and treat those appropriately, or they don't delve into the injury far enough to realize what might be initially a more minor injury in the grand scheme of things that can and will develop to more catastrophic over time.
Well, you gave us the example of the lady who had the cut, which resulted in 2 amputations. Can you give us some more specific examples of catastrophic injuries that you've handled for your clients over, 25 years? You've probably seen almost everything, right?
Yeah, I have. And death, obviously, that's the one that speaks for itself. That is extremely catastrophic. Unfortunately, I've handled many death claims over the years that span, really young children, unfortunately, all the way to elderly adults. And I don't want to minimize those. Those are obviously catastrophic, but when you're talking about injuries, someone who survived the impact or survived their personal injury issue, whether it was a slip and fall or dog bite, anything else. But amputations, I've handled multiple amputation cases. I mentioned the one. Severe internal injuries. This is something a lot of people don't realize. One of the most common injuries in a car wreck claim, especially in a rear end collision, is a ruptured spleen. And the reason why
I would not have realized
your
that.
lap belt. Your lap belt is designed to tighten with certain kind of impacts. And so depending on how the person is sitting in the car and how tight that lap belt is, it can result in a ruptured spleen, which requires a splenectomy, the removal of the spleen as emergency surgery. And kind of on a side note, we talked about other kinds of injury claims. I'm going to ask you a question, a trivia question. So what's the most common injury caused from bungee jumping?
Whiplash.
You would think whiplash, that sudden direction change in motion. It's actually detached retinas.
Oh, my goodness. Never would I have guessed that.
Yeah.
But that's horrifying.
So,
just like the pressure?
Yes, the sudden change in movement from, again, we're talking bungee jumping, and you jump from a bridge or a cliff or a platform, whatever, and when that bungee pulls you back, that's the number one injury from that. So I kind of got on a side note, but one of those trivia questions you might get at some point. Other kinds of catastrophic injuries, multiple bone fractures requiring surgeries that include hardware, pins, rods, screws, all kinds of things that they'll put in to repair basically completely a foot or a hand or an arm, whatever it may be. Traumatic brain injuries, I mentioned that before. Disc herniation, the spinal cord injuries, burns with scarring or disfigurement, and even death. I've handled burn cases. Unfortunately, I had a child who was burned over 80% of his body as a result of a rental property that caught fire. They're required in Georgia, and of course we're here in Georgia, to have smoke detectors, a certain number of smoke detectors, depending on the square footage of the premises. And this place did not have smoke detectors. And we were able to prove that. And unfortunately, a fire was set, and the place where they were living went up in flames. And this child, as a result of the fire, lost all but one finger on his hands. So there are all kinds of catastrophic things that can come from burns, like I said, scarring, disfigurement, even death. Vision and hearing loss. That is kind of a common injury, too, that people will sustain, and whether it be a car wreck or any other kind of personal injury claim. Neurological disorders, strokes, seizures following traumatic head injuries. People get headaches, but they don't realize, too, those can lead to strokes or seizures. Again, things to look into. Extreme concussions. Extreme concussions would be permanent light and sound and sensory sensitivity, where someone is now, because of the severity of the concussion, no longer able to be, as an example, at a concert or any place where there are light shows, those kind of things. So these are all catastrophic injuries that can lead to permanent impairment or other life-threatening disabilities that will need extensive lifetime medical care and treatment that could also be quite costly. So it's incumbent upon the attorney, and we do this for sure at our office, to make sure we address that cost going forward, to project out what that cost will be and what those conditions will require them to deal with, again, through the rest of the life. So it's my job to make sure the insurance company, or even a jury, if we go that route, understands how severe this is for my client and just how much that cost will be.
Well, I understand that you've represented many clients over the years that have suffered these kinds of catastrophic injuries. Are they limited to car wrecks? I mean, we talked about the bungee jumping
no.
and then the burn, but
no,
go a little deeper into that.
Yeah, although most are caused by car wrecks, I mentioned earlier, there are other ones. Consider this, slip and fall accident. As we discussed in prior podcasts, property owners have a duty to keep their the property safe and hazard-free for anyone. So I mentioned, too, that I handled the one where the gentleman was at I'm not going to say because I can't say, but a lumber supply location, and a pallet of lumber was spilled off of a forklift onto his legs, and he wound up with multiple fractures and surgeries. Also, too, many years ago, I handled a slip and fall case where someone wound up hitting their head on a concrete slab when they fell, and it resulted in irreversible brain damage. Again, a slip and fall case that led to permanent brain damage. Think about pedestrian-related accidents. I've represented many, many pedestrians over the years, and these tend to result in severe injuries almost every time. If you think about the size and weight of a car striking someone, the average size and weight person, that person's never going to stand a chance against that car. They're going to lose that battle every time. I remember one pedestrian in particular that I represented lost a leg as a result of a crushing injury when the tire on the car, when they were knocked down, rolled over their leg. And the crushing injury was so severe that they wound up having to amputate that leg. That is a catastrophic injury. Medical malpractice. It's a particularly difficult area of the law, but also the kind of claim that can often result in permanent catastrophic injuries just by the nature of the med mal claims. I mean, those are very difficult, but yet usually lead to extremely severe complications or problems through the rest of the person's life. And most med mal cases require confidentiality as part of that settlement, so I can't really discuss any of those in detail. But suffice it to say, there are a lot of very catastrophic injuries caused by medical malpractice claims.
Okay, well, thanks for that. That is much more in depth, and I think gives all of us the understanding of really what you do. And those are all terrible situations. I can't imagine how tough it must be for someone dealing with any of them. So you've explained them in detail, but tell us now, what separates you and your firm, the law office of Derek M. Hayes, when it comes to handling these types of claims?
I will say many things, and I say that not to be pompous or arrogant about it, but there are a lot of things that I see that I consider to be problems with other firms handling cases. Over the years, I've had people that have come to me that started with another firm and felt that they weren't being represented properly. They felt that the attorney would never talk to them, all kinds of complaints. And I've been able to get a copy of the file to take over. And it's amazing to me some of the things I've seen that I consider very severe deficiencies in how cases are set up, letters that need to be sent, things that need to be preserved from an evidentiary standpoint. But one of the most common mistakes I see attorneys make is to treat every single client and every single case the exact same. You can't do that. I call it the cookie cutter approach. And it's true. People, unfortunately, many times, just, okay, a case is coming to the door. Let's send it to this process and then this process and then this process without specifying for that individual case what needs to be done to handle it appropriately. Every case is not the same. Every case cannot be handled with that cookie cutter approach. So they have the same letters, the same standard forms, same standard procedures. They really create a production line for every single case, kind of like I mentioned. But think about the saying. I've used this before with a client. Would you rather be a big fish in a little pond where you get all the attention, or a little fish in a big pond where you're just a number? Period. And that's the deficiency. Many times firms treat clients purely as the next file in the door and only as a number, case number whatever, file number whatever, and don't treat them as the big fish that they should be in that firm. It is the most important case in the entire world for my client, and I need them to understand it's also going to be among the most important cases in my firm, just like every other file. We're going to treat it the way it needs to be treated every single time. So some firms simply have case managers. I've referenced that term before in other shows. They're not attorneys. They're trained to handle the case all the way through, even through a negotiation. And in Georgia, and true in many other states, attorneys should be the only ones handling the negotiation, not a case manager. Someone who doesn't have a law degree, someone who can't file suit, someone who can't try a case, but yet they're titled a case manager, and with a cookie cutter approach, they can handle the case and go through the process of negotiating, and an attorney never touches the file.
So let me interject here with a question about case managers, and you may or may not know the answer to this. So if you are working for the insurance company, so you would be the adjuster, and you're seeing the correspondence through only a case manager and not necessarily an attorney, are you going to
take advantage of
it
that?
as seriously? Right. Yeah.
Well,
Is it, oh gosh, I'm dealing with Derek Hayes, or I'm dealing with, John Doe over here.
Here's the thing too, that case manager may prepare the letter and set it on the attorney's desk, and the attorney's signature is actually there. But every time the adjuster calls, or every time the case manager, if you want to call it that, for the insurance company calls, if they're not talking to the attorney, they're going to realize, wait a minute, this guy's signing the letter, this lady's signing the letter, but it's not her. It's this other person who's not an attorney that every time I call, I speak to them and only to them. Mm-hmm. And it's not the attorney calling me saying, hey, I discussed the offer with my client. We're rejecting that. I've discussed the facts and the evidence, and this is what I want to point out. And therefore, our demand is X number of dollars. This case justifies it. It's not an attorney making that call, making that argument. And I want to be, and I've used this again many times, a zealous advocate for my client. I don't want my staff people taking on that role of an attorney. Again, as a case manager, trying to negotiate a claim, trying to handle a claim beginning to end, with the attorney simply walking by and signing a letter here and there, not even knowing the client's name.
So a lot of people may be listening going, okay, that's great. Mm-hmm, sure. In the non-believing what you're saying, right? Okay, he's an attorney, he's on a podcast, he's pitching himself. But let me just speak to you and about you as an attorney and your firm. What he is saying here is absolutely how Derek practices law. He does not have any case managers. He does have paralegals, but when it comes to speaking to his clients, speaking to every adjuster, literally being next to a phone for 12, sometimes 14 hours a day when you're making phone calls after hours, that to me is one of the biggest differences, but it is absolutely the way that you do business. Yeah,
and I feel it's a necessary step to understand what those injuries have done to my client, how it's changed their life. And a case manager can ask that question, of course, but that answer is not going to be completely conveyed to the attorney in its entirety, no matter what. There are going to be things that are going to be, misunderstood, or they didn't hear it correctly, or, somehow, some way it gets lost in translation. But if I ask the question and I'm making my own personal notes, speaking to every single client from the very beginning, I'm going to find out what's going on in their life. I'm going to find out, are you going to your doctor's appointment? What's the next step? Are they going to do injections? Is there going to be a need for surgery? All those things. So, in fact, if I'm available when the initial call comes into my office, they're going to talk to me. There are times when I'm in depositions or hearings or court or even appointments there at the office and I can't. But if anybody does call and I'm available, I guarantee you I'm going to speak with them because I do it every time. I'll discuss their case and really start that rapport from the very beginning.
Now, I don't want to get off topic, so let's go back to proving these kinds of injuries. Can you give me an example of a tool that you might use to prove this kind of claim to an insurance company or a jury?
There are many, and you've got to utilize every single one that applies to that specific case. But one of my favorites, and the one I want to talk about today, is what we call a day in the life video. Have you ever heard that phrase?
From you.
Well,
I did not know
right.
it. Yes, but you do these. I'll hear you say, I have to shoot a day in a life today.
Yeah, so very simply, a day in the life video documents my client's daily activities from the moment they wake up in the morning until the moment they go to bed. It's intended to show really firsthand how they struggle with the new reality after a catastrophic injury, and there really is a new reality of what their life is going to be like. The video can show if my client is managing the life on their own, if they have to have a caretaker, if they are living in a care facility, if their family or spouse has to do things for them. It can effectively communicate the difficulty to complete ordinary daily activities, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, fixing lunch, changing the channel on a TV. There's so many things that we kind of take for granted. With a catastrophic injury, you may not be able to do anymore. And it's the importance of a day in the life video to show and convey what those things are like and how it affected my client directly as a result of their injuries. I can have someone sit in a witness stand all day and talk about what they're going through, but it'll never be as effective as that day in the life video can be. And the reality is that juries love to watch things. When I pull a video screen down in a courtroom, and most of them come from the ceiling nowadays with technology, and I start to put a video on with a computer, it's amazing. You'll see the seats turn, the notepads and pens will be in their lap, and every single one of them is focused on that video. It's amazing. Sometimes I'm sure in a jury box with a notepad and pen, an attorney's talking forever or a witness is testifying forever. The attention span can kind of fade, and somebody might start writing out their grocery list.
Sure.
I need eggs, I need
No,
bacon,
you are.
I need
You're
bread,
thinking
I need
about what's
peanut
going on
butter,
at
jelly.
home.
Right. But when that video is on, again, it's amazing that the body language, they stay engaged much longer and more completely, and they watch the video, and you'll see tears come in eyes because they're understanding what that life is now like.
45 minutes. That's the attention span. That is all someone can hold. Is 45 minutes. We do a lot of staff training on that, and they are only 45 minutes long.
Right, and
that's the way our human brain is wired.
On a side note, too, if you have a major case, an opening statement or a closing argument, that can take a couple hours or longer. It's interesting that many times one attorney will start and will begin the opening statement and go for about 40 or 45 minutes, purposely stop to let the next attorney, step up, so that one person is not talking for that entire hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be.
They're not listening after 45 minutes.
Attention spans fade.
All right. That all makes sense. And I've heard you talk about things being admissible or not admissible in trial. Are those videos admissible every time?
Well, kind of a loaded question, which I expected, but the answer is not necessarily. Here's the thing. The distinction comes down to who made the video, how it was edited, whether things depicted in the video are staged, things like that. So there are production companies that we hire that go and do these day in the life videos that can then later on take the witness stand and authenticate the video and authenticate the editing process. It must be probative in nature and not purely prejudicial. In other words, it must provide some evidence that a jury can rely on in deciding what needs to be given to a plaintiff to compensate them for what happened. It can't be prejudicial where it's intended to only make someone sympathetic and cry, staged performance, not the real life video that it's supposed to be. The person authenticating it is usually the one that filmed it or the one that edited, which also may be the same person. And again, there are companies out there that's what they do. They're professional companies that we hire to step in and make those videos for us. So
if the defense sees it before you go to court, will a judge rule if it's probative or prejudicial, or does it come out? It's one of the objections they will make almost every time. And whether or not it's probative or prejudicial, I'll make my argument as to why it's purely probative in nature.
the defense attorney will make their argument as to why it's prejudicial. But it comes down to judge's discretion. Judge's discretion means the judge can decide.
Right. But I guess what I was asking is, will that judge take that video into chambers and watch it?
They can request that it be previewed by the judge
Yes.
before its admissibility.
Okay. Just
but
curious.
That's also, too, the importance of me as the attorney making sure it can be properly authenticated, that the unedited video can also be available for scrutiny if necessary. So if the unedited video, which may be 3 or 4 hours long, is trimmed down to a 30-minute production for the purpose of the courtroom, the day in the life, I will also, too, have to provide that unedited video. So if there are times where, my client, for example, is struggling to get out of the bed, and the edited video, the one that's presented to a jury, but they're like the outtakes of the client jumping up in and out of bed, which obviously wouldn't be happening, then that's something they would argue, wait a minute, this is prejudicial as opposed to probative, because to be probative, they need to see all aspects of this. To authenticate it, it can require testimony from several people, not just the one that filmed and edited. It could also require the day-to-day person that does the care of the patient. If it's a life care planner, a nurse practitioner, a spouse, a family member, kids, whomever it may be. It can be prepared for pretrial mediations or settlement conferences. We do that as well. Not to get on a side note, but animations are important now for reconstructing car wrecks. An animation of a truck wreck, a very catastrophic truck wreck injury, can require the need to have an animated video to recreate the actual impact and show the angle of impact, the speed, all those kind of things. But back to the day in life, though, the video can be more effective than any deposition. I can depose a doctor. I can depose an accident reconstructionist. The doctor can talk about the injuries. They can provide, an understanding of what happened. But seeing it with your own eyes can really do so much more. Words can tell a story, but the pictures can be a lot more effective. It's also too imperative that the other side truly understand, the insurance side, the defense attorney, the adjuster, what your client's life is like after that catastrophic injury. And the video can do that very effectively. When I do the video, or when I have one of the videos made for a client, we include pre-injury photographs to show what the client was like before their injury and what they're like now. It can include music, charts that show different things about their well-being, their day-to-day activities as to what they did before and what they are limited in doing now. Think about how many times you've heard the phrase, seeing is believing. This is a perfect example of seeing and therefore believing exactly what the person goes through. So yeah, I'll absolutely make a day in the life video part of my client's case when it's necessary. But again, far too often other firms may consider it either a hassle or too much of an expense, and really want to avoid so much of that, and can also too lose a lot of value to your claim by not effectively representing the client and doing what's necessary.
Well, I said it mid-show, and I'll say it again. All of these points is how you go above and beyond for your clients, and to the detriment sometimes of your own life. As I sit here as your fiance, and I can say, you work too hard, and you return every phone call, and you go in on the weekends, and you're always, just in it. But that is you being a zealous advocate, and that is what makes you a phenomenal attorney, because you absolutely care about every single one of your clients.
Well, to maximize value of the claim, you've got to maximize your effort.
Okay, I said it in layman's terms, and then you gave it as an attorney. I like mine a little better. I was bragging on you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You are very welcome. But as we wrap up, because we are out of time, and I hate to say it, but time does fly when you get started. I'm sure there are other things you want to discuss when it comes to proving catastrophic injuries. We will save that for another show. Please, what?
I want to interject here.
Okay.
I didn't get to talk about other things, specifically using a forensic economist in proving damages. Big
I don't know what that is.
Well, that's it.
That's what we got to break down.
So an economist, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically they can talk about the income effects and the cost of living for someone with a catastrophic injury. So again, that's something we can talk about later on. We can make that the next topic, the next show.
Okay.
I mentioned just
give us a little teaser. Okay.
Yeah. I also too mentioned the animation and how that's utilized. There are all kinds of other techniques that as the attorney, I have to make those decisions. Which one of those techniques will be most effective for that individual case? And again, you can't do that in a cookie cutter setting. I say it all the time. Mm-hmm. It's not going to get the maximum effort and therefore not get the maximum results.
Absolutely. All right. They need to use you. You need to represent, right? They're listening to this and they have questions. They've been injured. I'm going to turn it over to you to tell all of your listeners, how can they find you? How can they submit a question for the podcast? And how can they submit a question for you to possibly be their attorney?
Let's start with the website. The website is Derek, D-E-R-E-K, the letter M as in Matthew, Hayes, Hays.com. So DerekMHayes.com. On my website, you'll see a couple of things I want to point out. One is my podcast tab. If you click that, you can go directly to the podcast. All of the podcasts are available there to go back and listen, but you can also submit a question directly to me for a potential show or a show topic, whatever you want to do. So go to the podcast tab, or if you have a question about a potential case, there's also an area where you can communicate directly with me. Click on the tab there. You can send me a direct email and I will be the one to call you personally to discuss your potential claim. We also have a chat feature that will show up on your screen so you can chat directly with us about a potential claim. I will be the one to call you. As I said before, the initial consultation is always free. Doesn't cost a penny to call me or to reach out to me by email. You can also go to my Facebook page, the Law Office of Derek M. Hayes. Go to my Instagram page, the Law Office of Derek M. Hayes. My phone numbers, 404-777-HURT or 678-225-0970.
Thank you, Derek.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Injury Insider with Derek Hayes, presented by Status Home Design and the Law Office of Derek M. Hayes. Don't forget that you can enjoy any of these episodes anytime by visiting businessradiox.com, selecting the Gwinnett Studio, and then clicking on Injury Insider with Derek Hayes. This program is also available on Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, for Derek Hayes, I'm Lita Brooks, and you've been listening to Injury Insider on Business Radio X.